How to rebrand and become unrecognizable in 42 days. You may have seen a lot of content like this, but this video is going to be quite different, more than likely, than anything you've ever seen before. We're going to get into the really deep energetic shifts that need to happen in order for you to completely rebrand your identity and, as a result, completely change your experience of reality. The next 42 days of your life are going to pass. Whether you do what I tell you to do in this video or not, that time is going to pass by regardless. If you follow along with me today, and this is going to be a really practical video, and actually follow the different steps over the next 42 days and really wire in what I'm going to share with you, you are going to be standing in an entirely new version of yourself. And even if we think about why you've even clicked on this video, why do you want to rebrand? Why do you want to become unrecognizable? It's probably because this version of you that you've been for your whole life is not getting you the outcomes in reality that you prefer. Maybe you feel really limited. Maybe you feel really stuck. Maybe you feel really lost. Maybe you feel really insecure. Whatever it is, the steps in this video are going to help you shift your state dramatically. And the reason for that is, anything that you desire, any feeling state that you desire, any identity trait that you desire, it's not off limits to you. The only thing that's been blocking you from actually embodying that is the program that's been installed into you that you've been running on autopilot up until this moment. So I'm not going to be telling you to work harder. I'm not going to be telling you to hustle more. I'm not going to be feeding into, all of this self-help stuff that most people regurgitate. The purpose of the steps I'm going to be sharing with you and this kind of program for the next 42 days is to bring you back into alignment with your highest self, your most aligned, empowered, and authentic self. Because beneath the program that you've been running that's making you miserable, that's making you live an identity that you don't prefer, is your essence, is your wholeness, is your truth, is your peace and your fulfillment. So essentially, we're going to be removing the layers throughout this process that are blocking you from really, really seeing, embodying, and being this empowered version of you. I don't care how far away you seem right now from your preferred identity. This is the stuff that I've used myself personally to get out of depression, anxiety, hopelessness, despair, being completely broke financially, single in toxic relationship patterns, to now living my most aligned dream life as my dream woman. And I've helped clients do it with the same process that I'm going to be sharing with you today. It really doesn't matter where you're starting from. Anybody can have a dramatic transformation if you use the steps I'm going to be sharing with you. The reason for that is your identity is essentially just your state of consciousness, okay? And there are certain components that make up that state of consciousness. When you shift those components, as we're going to do today, your identity, how you perceive yourself, and the things that are possible for you has no choice but to change to reflect that. This self that you want to become, this unrecognizable self, is simply just a parallel version of you that already exists, but it's in a different state of consciousness. It has a different frequency. So essentially, I'm going to be guiding you through a 6-step process today to alter your frequency to align with this rebranded, leveled up, aligned version of you. And when you do that, you're not constrained by time. You're not constrained by anything from the past. Your consciousness is determining what you're experiencing in this reality. So no term, no condition, no logical time frame can get in your way when you actually just shift your consciousness and shift your frequency. It doesn't even need to take 42 days, but 42 days is more than enough time to go through each phase of this transformation and fully shift your energy, your state, and your identity. Okay, so we're first going to break down what the self is actually comprised of, because if you want to rebrand and become unrecognizable, essentially what you want to do is shift your self, your identity, the version of you that you're embodying. So the self is essentially just an energetic frequency. It's comprised of your identity, which is made up of your beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and what you're focusing on. Okay, these are basically the building blocks of your energetic frequency or your identity. Okay, so when we look at shifting, you want to be able to shift your beliefs, your thoughts, your emotions, and your focus, because that's what's actually going to shift your identity. If you think of your identity like the top of a table, these are the legs that make up that table. And some people, like masters in identity shifting and consciousness shifting, are able to just shift identity, and they're just able to do it on that level. This is the highest level of transformation, okay? But most people, because we, live in this 3D world and it can invoke a lot of fear to just suddenly change your entire identity, we need to first start shifting on these kind of the legs of the table. We start shifting at the legs, and then over time, it becomes easier to make the overall big shift. For us to just transplant ourselves into an entirely new identity all at once, we're almost too logical. We're too based in the past and our experiences to just fully be able to do that. So it's a lot more manageable for an average person to shift their focus, shift their emotions, shift their thoughts and beliefs. And then overall, those are the building blocks of the self, of the identity, of your frequency, that then begins to shift. Then once you have momentum and you've started gaining energy in a new state, in a new identity, it becomes a lot easier. I want you to just think about, before we move on, what has your current brand been? Who have you been up until this moment? What has been your identity? How do you perceive yourself? And by the way, if you haven't already, I want you to go and get a piece of paper and a pen, because you're going to be doing exercises with me throughout this video so you can actually wire this stuff in, okay? It's so important that we do this practically, because you can take in all the information that you want, but if you don't actually sit down and apply it and go through the exercises, it's not going to work, okay? So write down on a piece of paper right now, what has your brand or your identity been? How would you define your character? What characteristics would you use to define yourself? What do you believe about yourself and the world, about reality? Okay, these are like the top layers. It can be kind of difficult, and when we go through the phases, it's going to be a lot easier for you to uncover this stuff. But because this is all wrapped up in the ego, it can be really difficult for you to actually see these things clearly about yourself unless you drop into an observer state consistently. But just start opening up to considering, what are your characteristics? What are your dominant traits that you identify as? What are your core beliefs? Okay, so what are your beliefs about yourself? What are your beliefs about the world, about reality, about what's possible? What do you think about? Try that again. What the fuck? What do you think about most of the time? Okay, so in and of itself, your thoughts don't actually carry that much weight, but the things that you think about most of the time typically indicate your beliefs, and that is very important when it comes to your identity and it comes to the version of you who you've been embodying. How do you feel most of the time? On a day-to-day basis, just think about, how have you been feeling every day? Do you look like my friend here, who, by the way, I did not draw, so shout out MX again for the art. But I really don't want to rub him out. He's really cute. But how do you feel? Are you quite sad? Are you quite frustrated? Do you get, annoyed easily? Look up, to define this, look up the list of emotions. There's like a grid you can look up online that shows you like all the different emotions that a human being can feel, and actually start defining, how have you actually been feeling? Your emotions are a really big key when it comes to determining the energetic frequency that you have been operating on. They are kind of the fuel for your whole frequency. So they're one of the most important factors when it comes to this. And then another key thing to ask yourself is, what have you been focusing on? Have you been focusing on your flaws? Have you been focusing on your problems? Have you been focusing on the worst case scenario? This is how we tend to focus, because we're basically wired. Our brains, the animalistic side of our brains, the 3D reality side of our brains, is very rooted in our survival. And so we tend to be constantly scanning and looking for threats and dangers. This is especially enhanced if we've been through a lot of pain and trauma in our lives that hasn't been resolved yet. And so we tend to look constantly for dangers, for worst case scenarios, for bad, for negative. If you think from an evolutionary perspective, when we were in the wild and we were trying to stay safe from threats, you know, our bodies will not be scanning for where's the next fruit tree, because that's not that relevant. You'll just find that automatically. But you're constantly subconsciously scanning for threats and dangers because that was a threat to your life. Now you're not in the wild anymore, but a lot of us still have this unconscious programming of constantly looking for the worst case scenarios. So if that's you, don't beat yourself up, but just take note. What have you been focusing on? How have you been feeling? What have your dominant emotions been? What's your emotional kind of baseline? What do you think about most of the time? What are your beliefs about yourself and about the world? And how would you describe yourself? What's your self-concept? What are your traits and characteristics? So this is your current brand. And just to be clear, this is simply an energetic frequency, okay? This is the self that you've been playing, and the building blocks of the self are all of these things that we just went through. So naturally, how you rebrand and change the version that you've been playing in this game of reality is you change these building blocks. That's it. Sounds easy, right? You probably know if you've done this inner work before that it's not easy, but it is simple. And the way I'm about to go through this with you is going to make it so much easier basically to apply to your life. Because we're going to go through the things that trip most people up and stop them from actually being able to align with a new self. I forgot to mention the last component of the self or the brand that you've been living in is your actions. Okay, so all of these things we just went through, that's your internal state, that's your frequency. That actually compels you to take physical action, but that is a part of your overall brand as well. So you can also add in the question, what actions, what behaviors, and what habits have you been running on autopilot probably as this current brand or this current self that you've been living in? Before we get into the blueprint, we're going to define the new brand or the new self that you want to step into to the point that you're unrecognizable. So if you're familiar with my work, you know what's coming next. Write down a stick figure, please. This is not just any stick figure. This is you as this new brand, this unrecognizable self. I actually can't. I need art lessons. Okay. Don't worry about how artistic or not your stick figure is. Just really anchor into the fact that this is the version of you that you're going to be in 42 days, aka 6 weeks. 42 days is 6 weeks, by the way. So this version of you, this unrecognizable you, who are they? Let's define it. Just like you defined the version that you've been playing up until this moment. Let's define the version that you're going to be switching into over the next 6 weeks. So first question to ask, define this self's characteristics, their traits. Are they confident? Are they loyal? Are they committed? Are they stylish? Are they outgoing? Whatever comes to mind. And you know, what we can do together to actually tune into this is I want you to really just even close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and really, really anchor in to who your higher self is. Don't base this off what looks good in society. Don't base this off what your friend thinks or what your family thinks or anything else. Base this off what your truth is, what your most empowered, most authentic, aligned self looks like. I'll explain more in a while why that's important, but just trust me, I've helped so many people go through transformations, and the most potent, most fulfilling transformations are the ones where you follow what's really aligned with you and your soul, okay? So tune into your heart space and tune into your truth and what your highest, most empowered self looks like and feels like. And then write down the answers to these questions. So we have characteristics, first of all. When I did this exercise, I used to have all of these traits that I thought I wanted to become. I wanted to rebrand. I wanted to become unrecognizable, but it was coming from a lot of ego, and it was coming from a lot of insecurity, as ego often does. And, you know, I started acting in a way that was not actually in accordance with my truth. So I redid this exercise, but I tuned into my higher self, and I visualized meeting my highest version, the highest version of me, just walking towards me and meeting her. And what I found out is she was loving. She was way less serious. She was much more compassionate than I was striving for. And there were all these little nuanced things that I found out about my higher self and what was really aligned with me that I never had considered before, because I was thinking too much from my ego and what would look good to other people. And the more I chased those things, the worse I actually felt, because nothing feels worse than living a life in misalignment. Living a life as a version of you who you're really not meant to be, who doesn't resonate with you, okay? So with that being said, tune into your higher self. We're all very unique. We're all very different. So just make sure that what you write down feels aligned for you. So, you know, one person, it could be that you're a little bit more direct and you're more calm and you're more serious. Another person, your higher self might be more lighthearted, might be more open, might be more playful in their energy. And so you need to define this in accordance with what's really aligned for you. So some examples from my own tuning into my higher self was more loving, more compassionate, more playful, more grounded. A really key one is I was very nurturing when I tuned into this version of me. I was really in like this maternal energy, which was kind of strange, but that was such a good insight for me of something that I wanted to bring in. And when I brought this characteristic in and I started embodying it, it felt incredible, and it opened me up to a lot of aligned things coming into my reality because I was in my most aligned energy. So keep going with this and just list all of yours out. You might get calm, you might get centered, you might get grateful, whatever it is, leader, all of these things that come to mind when you picture clearly this version of you. I've made a video before that you might have seen, it might be why you're here, about how to level up. And we talk about connecting to your vision in order to connect to the version of you in the vision. So if you find it easier when we're defining this self that you're going to be morphing into over the next few weeks, if you find it easier to take a physical outcome or a dimension in reality that you're shooting for in order to anchor into this version of you, then you can do that as well. So you can visualize living in that scenario, close your eyes and be the version of you who's already living that reality, and then tune into your body and see, who are you? What are your traits? How do you feel? How would you describe yourself as the version of you who's already living a dream of yours? Okay, next up, what do you believe as this version of you that the current you doesn't believe? Or what does the current you believe that this version of you doesn't believe? Okay, we will get into this more in a second, but just if something comes to mind as you're tuning into this version of you, write it down. What does this version of you believe about themselves? And what does this version of you believe about reality, the world, and what's possible? About money, about success, business, whatever. What are their beliefs? Just write a few of those down as they're coming to mind as you're connected to this version of you. So some examples are, I am more than good enough. I am capable. Anything is possible for me. I create my reality, yada, yada, yada. Thoughts. So what is this version of you thinking about? They're probably thinking more about positive things and possibilities. Write down whatever comes to mind. Emotions. This is so key. This is so key. Remember me saying that emotions, your emotional state is the most significant component of your frequency. So what is the dominant emotional state of this version of you? How do they feel on a day-to-day basis? Some examples: grateful, calm. There might be a little bit of overlap here, but that's fine. Peaceful. Okay, and the last one to consider is, what is this version of you focused on? So again, I'm just giving you examples. You want to make this correspond to your most empowered, most aligned self, what they'd be focused on. But some examples are they'd be more focused on aligned projects, things that they're passionate about, growth, etc., etc. So all of this creates your energetic frequency, which is your identity or your brand. And that is what is creating your experience of reality. And I know I've mentioned this a million times, but if you stay in the old self, you will stay in the old reality. Nothing in external reality can change until you change. So I want you to just consider, before we go into the steps and how to actually wire this in and align with this version of you fully, I want you to consider what you have to gain by becoming this version of you. It can be really difficult sometimes to let go of our old identity. That's the biggest thing that's standing in your way. The steps are going to show you how to do that. But one thing that always makes it easier to let go of something is to have something else to hold on to with two hands, okay? So when you picture being this version of you, becoming this unrecognizable self, what does this self have access to that your old self does not? Why do you want to be this self? Because if you don't have enough of an emotional pull towards becoming this version of you, you're going to default to your old autopilot program, because the autopilot program is sneaky and it is pretty strong and it is pretty tempting. It's what you're always going to revert back to. So you need to have enough clarity about where you're heading and excitement about where you're heading that it pulls you away from where you've been. So think about it, really think about it. This version of you, what does life and reality look like as this unrecognizable self, as this new brand? What can they be, do, and have that the old you cannot? And get excited about it. Really connect to that and get excited about it, because now you're going to learn how to do it. Okay, what I'm about to walk you through is essentially the process of reconfiguring your energy completely. And the first phase of this process, it's a 6-phase process. If you're in my community, you're going to be familiar with this. This is how I structure the modules and all the resources inside my community, as well as the coaching program. It's structured in a very similar way. But this is basically engineered, first of all, to call your energy back into your body, away from the external world, away from your addiction to your old thoughts, and to break that attachment to your old identity. So there's 6 phases when it comes to completely rebranding your identity and becoming an unrecognizable version of you. You're going to be taking this phase 1, week 1, phase 2, week 2. Okay, so it's very simple. You probably haven't been able to shift your identity because you haven't wired in the first couple of phases that I'm going to be sharing with you. Nobody wants to do phase 1 or phase 2 because they're not sexy. But this is the foundational stuff that's going to make the later work so much easier. So phase 1 is all about recharging your energy. So each and every one of us has a certain amount of life force energy, creative consciousness flowing in our body, in our energy field. And you've been getting the results that you've been getting. You've been feeling the way you've been feeling. You've been embodying the way you've been embodying, because you've been feeding your life force into a program and into an external reality that has created this self that you have become. And when you're trying to create a new identity, it is impossible to shift identity and to shift your energy if you don't have any spare energy to do that. If you're completely energetically drained, if you're in fight or flight mode, if you're in survival mode, you are going to find it almost impossible to actually do the inner work to shift your state and your identity. I want you to think about for a minute, if you were ever in a very draining relationship or friendship, or even living with a family that was very draining. And the moment that you separated yourself from that environment, or you left that relationship, all of a sudden you had a surge of energy. And you were suddenly able to shift your identity and change all of these things. You see this all the time, especially after breakups. You suddenly had all this drive, all this energy to change your life and to change your identity. Why? Because you removed an energy drain from your environment. And so that life force energy that you were pouring into this person or pouring into this situation came back into your body, and then you were able to use it to focus on what you wanted to change and what you wanted to actually pour into. Phase 1 of week 1 is to eliminate energy drainers. This is super basic and super simple. Write down 5 things that are stealing your energy. This could be a person, this could be a situation, this could be a habit, this could be social media, this could be food, this could be your lifestyle, this could be your sleeping pattern. Write down 5 things, just 5 that are draining your energy. If you can name more than that, if you want to just keep going with it, that's fine, but at least 5 things. Write them down. You definitely have 5 things. Don't tell me you don't. So these are things that when you do them, you feel exhausted after it, or you know you don't feel good. So if you've met up with somebody and you leave and you feel terrible, that's an energy drainer. If you eat a meal and you feel terrible, that's an energy drainer. If you engage in a certain habit and you feel terrible afterwards, that's an energy drainer, okay? So just 5 things that drain you, write them down. And then I want you to write down 5 things that charge you. So I want you to start thinking about yourself almost as like an energetic battery, because really that's what you are. You have like electrical energy flowing through your body. This is creative energy. You need this, okay, to create something new in your life. And something that can really help you, rather than looking at what you're losing here, I want you to bring in 5 things that support your energy, that charge you up. So again, this could be certain people that are really supportive and that give you energy in whatever conversations you're having. This could be habits, okay? So just think about it right now. Notice, what are the things that you've done that always, without a fail, make you feel better? Very simple. So for me, this is things like yoga. Okay, I resisted doing yoga for a while. I don't really know why. I think I just didn't want to be like converting to like a super spiritual identity. I had some ego resistance to that. But I noticed every single time I went to a particular yoga class that I have here near my home, I felt incredible. And so one day I was just standing there and I realized I need to do that every week, because it gives me so much energy for the week, even if I just go once. So notice the things that give you energy. What are the foods that when you eat them, you feel great? Okay, so again, I've mentioned this before, but green tea. I don't like drinking green tea too much, but I always feel, whether it's placebo or not, I have a lot of energy after. I feel really good. I'm in like a healthy, productive identity when I do that. Sleeping patterns, exercise routines, everything. What are 5 things that give you energy? Now commit to these and cancel out these. For the first week, this is what you're focusing on. You want to bring in the 5 things that give you energy, cancel out the things that drain you. That's the first part of the energy recharge for week 1. Then the second part, this I've spoken about a million times, because this, when I look back at my own life and I notice the things that really were like the big dominoes in me being able to shift my frequency dramatically and shift my reality dramatically, this was one of the really, really massive components of it. You are going to create your container of peace, or container for peace. When I first implemented this, it was back in 2020. And I was living with my then boyfriend. I was actually staying in his house because it was during COVID times. So we had like a gym set up in the shed. And I was chasing all of these things that were not aligned. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I had just really fallen head over heels in love with psychology, self-development, and spirituality. But I was in the middle of a law degree. So I was having this like fragmentation and this confusion about what to do, as well as the stress of just that time and everything, as well as the relationship not being very aligned either. And I had an anxious attachment. So there was a lot going on in my energy. But one thing I decided to do at this time is I was going to start carving out the first hour of my day as my sacred time to connect to myself, to let go of my fears, to let go of my worries, and just be present and go within. And so I don't want to hear any excuses about this, because I literally used to do this. I had nowhere to really do this in that house. I used to go out to the sheds in Ireland in the cold weather at like very, very early hours in the morning before anyone was awake. And I would sit there and I would just meditate. And I cannot tell you the level of bliss that I reached sitting there in that cold ass shed, you know, with nothing around me to really be that blissful about. And I discovered that bliss and peace and any feeling state that I really wanted was within me. And it was in my detachment to the external world. So in week 1, you want to eliminate drainers from your reality, but you also want to go within and detach from the external world every single day. Because being so attached to the external, being so attached to your old thoughts and your old identity is what's draining you more than anything. So you're going to take 1 hour a day where you are in solitude, in silence, and you become present. If we look at you as a battery, let's just say when you came here, you had full creative life force energy, okay? So this is your energy field and it was fully charged up. So this was full, the meter was full. Then you went out into the world and you started to be programmed by external reality to place all of your attention, all of your emotion, all of your precious life force energy into external circumstances. So you've been feeding your life force into circumstances, into worries, into news, into politics, into drama, into things that you don't prefer, into family situations, relationships, whatever. And so your meter, your life force, your energetic meter is basically down here. So this is how much you have left. So you're putting your attention on news, on fears, on people, on drama, on like thoughts that don't serve you, and just overall situations. On autopilot, every day when you wake up and open your eyes, you do this on autopilot. So this is why the container for peace, I would recommend you do the first hour of your day, because you're going to break this autopilot feeding of your energy into everything outside you that's not giving you anything. And then what's going to happen is you get back into this state. So you're basically calling your life force, your energy back from all of these things that are draining you and not giving you anything when you do this consistently every single day. And so your energy that you physically have in your body starts to recharge and refill. There's a specific meditation that I love for this. It's called the Frame Technique Meditation. You can find it on YouTube if you look it up from the original creator, or I have my version in my community that I do as well. But every day you want to sit down. So right now, what I want you to do is decide what time you're going to do this every day. Decide how long you're going to do it for. Decide where you're going to do this. Are you going to be in the shed like I was? Are you going to go out into the balcony? Are you going to go sit outside? Are you going to do it, in your bedroom? Whatever. Figure out when you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, how long you're going to do it for. And I want you to commit to some kind of practice that will regulate you and make you more present. If you don't like meditation, okay, I always am going to recommend meditation, but you want to do something that's going to regulate your nervous system and take you out of survival mode, which survival mode is what's draining you because you're putting your attention constantly on fears and things outside you, so you're constantly drained. So every day for a week, you sit down in silence for 1 hour and you pick a regulating practice. This could be breath work. This could be meditation. This could be stretching. This could be EFT tapping. This could be simply just going outside and putting your feet on the grass and just being present and looking at the nature around you. Just pick one regulating practice that you're going to do every morning before the world has access to you that makes you more present, that makes you more regulated, and do it in silence and do it in solitude, unless you're listening to like meditation music. This is going to basically allow you to become present. It's going to allow you to stop living by the automatic program of the past and in that survival mode. And from this state, you can enter creative mode. You cannot be in a creative, open, abundant energy of possibilities if you're stuck in the past, if you're stuck on autopilot, and if you're stuck in fight or flight mode, okay? So regulate your nervous system, please. Take some time to sit with yourself every day, get to know yourself in silence, and every other step that's to come after this will be 1,000 times easier, I promise. It will actually be enjoyable. It'll feel natural when you set this foundation first in week 1. Week 2, phase 2. Okay, phase 2, week 2, please do not move on to this unless you've gone through week 1. Once you've connected to yourself, once you've made that container of peace and you've cut out all the distractions and all the noise that's been draining you, then you're ready to move on to phase 2, which is increasing self-trust. These are the essential components of mastering yourself, is trusting yourself. This is level 1. If you are not able to keep your word to yourself, if you know you can't keep any commitments to yourself, then why would you believe that you'd actually be able to change your reality? You won't, okay? So I spoke about this in my sabotage video. The difference between somebody who's able to run headfirst into the unknown and create massive transformation and someone who's just not able to do that and gets paralyzed by fear and doubt and insecurity is self-trust. A person who trusts themselves, that's like the anchor. That is basically like a superpower in this world, because you know no matter what, you'll be fine. You'll figure it out because you have your own back. I have a whole video called Self-Trust is Your Secret Weapon if you want a more really deep breakdown of self-trust and how to regain it. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to give you the really simple tools to implement this immediately. The first practice to do is write down 3 things you've been avoiding and go and do those things. Immediately, your self-trust is going to increase. The second powerful thing you can do to really start trusting in yourself and having conviction in your ability to alter your identity and your reality is to define your priorities and set non-negotiables in alignment with your priorities. So list your top 10 priorities in your life, the things that are most important to you, that you want to focus on a day-to-day basis. This can be projects, this can be habits, this can be characteristics, this can be just things you want to embody. What are the priorities of the version of you? And this is why we tuned into that self in the beginning. What are the priorities of that unrecognizable self? Write them down, 10 of them. And then you want to go and list 3 to 5 non-negotiables. These are daily things that you prioritize every single day. And you want to narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3 that are absolute non-negotiables. So no matter what your day looks like, no matter if you end up in Timbuktu or you're having a normal day, you always do these things. And so for me, for example, I've spoken about this a lot, but mine is obviously meditation. That came from me tuning into my higher, most empowered aligned self and figuring out, okay, that version of me meditates and she reads every single day. And so no matter where I am, no matter what situation I'm in, even if I'm on holidays, I do these things. Why? Because it's who I am and it maintains a really strong base level of self-trust because I know I'm showing up for my truth and my alignment. So these are not just random things that you're writing down. These are the things that align you with your truth, with your authentic, most empowered self, okay? And when you really show up on a daily basis for these things, you make it clear what your priorities are, what your non-negotiables are, and you design your days to be able to show up for those things, your self-trust is going to go through the roof. And then your ability to actually go out into the world and create change and make things happen is going to increase dramatically. Okay, week 3, attention mastery. For the entirety of week 3, I want you to be brutally honest about what are you focusing on. No matter if you're focusing on something in a positive sense or a negative sense, that's irrelevant. Even if you're resisting something, so even if you're saying, I would hate for this to happen, I don't want this to happen, I'm worried about this thing happening, oh, I hope this doesn't happen, or if you're complaining about something, The universe does not care whether you're speaking about it in a positive or a negative sense. It only cares what you're focusing on and what you're directing your energy towards in the form of placing your attention on it. So become very, very, very honest with yourself in week 3, phase 3 of this process, about where you're placing your attention. Because what you place your attention on, whatever you're placing it on, you're basically giving the thing that you're putting your attention on access to you. Your attention is basically the gate through which information gains access to you and your mind and your energy. You want to cut out anything that's causing like mental noise and mental chaos. Even if you're watching, like, say, for example, really violent TV programs or a lot of news, because you're placing your attention on this thing, that thing is gaining access to you and your energy. So whatever frequency that thing carries, it's going to be adopted into your energy. You're going to be programming your subconscious mind with the things that you place a lot of attention on and that you buy into with your emotions. So it's quite serious, actually. Become very, very meticulous about what you're putting your attention on, because that is your currency. Okay, we say paying attention. The English language is very literal. You're basically giving your life force away with your attention when you put it on something. And you can know how valuable your attention is if you just look at social media companies. Your attention, our attention collectively in this human race, is the most valuable resource on the planet. Okay, companies are profiting billions off of our attention, our life force, us feeding our attention into these algorithms and these things coming up on social media. So it's an extremely, extremely valuable resource, and you must start treating it as such. Whatever you put your attention on, if you put it on it for long enough, it expands, it grows, and it perpetuates in your reality, because it becomes a part of your energy, a part of your frequency, and then that is cast outwards in what you perceive and what you continue to resonate with in reality. So for week 3, you cut out distractions. Every time you notice that you're focusing on something that you don't prefer, or you don't want to be a part of your energy and you don't want to continue to persist in your reality, you shift your focus from what you don't prefer to what you do prefer, okay? Very simple. This is like basic alchemy. When you're thinking about, even if you're looking at your reality and you're going, that's so bad, I hate that, even your financial situation, maybe your friendship group, whatever it is, instead of focusing on what you don't prefer, you want to put your focus on what you do prefer. So let's say, for example, I've given this example before. Let's say, for example, you're looking at your financial situation and all the things that you don't prefer about your financial situation. You're going to keep resonating with that reality. That's going to stay a part of your identity. You're going to be staying in the old version of you because you're paying attention still as the old version of you. So you want to look at, how would the unrecognizable, the new version of me, pay attention to this thing? They would look at all the good things about my financial situation. They would look at all the ways that I am abundant. They would look at maybe what's coming, what's in the pipeline, right? So you want to always go back to the version of you that you're becoming. How would they focus on this thing? What are they focusing on, and what are they absolutely not focusing on? They're not focusing on the lack. They're not focusing on the worries. They're not focusing on the worst case scenario. So that's how you need to shift your attention, because that's what's going to allow you to start aligning with that identity. And once you do this, the things you don't prefer are simply going to fall away out of your experience because you've stopped feeding your life force into them. And the things you do prefer are going to align for you. They're actually not only going to align, they're going to compound and grow, because that is what attention does. It grows the thing that you put it on. So align your attention to be resonant with the version of you that you wish to become. What are they paying attention to? Use that as your compass. Okay, phase 4 or week 4, belief mastery. At this point, you're going to be very aware. Like, if you actually have gone through the first 3 phases and you've come to this point, you're going to be so aware of what your blocks are, okay? You're going to know the beliefs, the narratives, the thoughts, the things that are stopping you from fully stepping into this version of you. So at this point, it's a great time to start rewriting your story. What do I mean by that? You start changing your beliefs. So I have a whole video on how to rewire your subconscious mind. You can go and watch that for a full breakdown, or I have a whole module on it in my community if you want to join and get step-by-step tutorials to guide you through this process. You can find the link for that below. However, this is just really simply how you want to go about this in week 4. First of all, just know, I need you to just know that any belief that you hold basically puts you in a box, okay? In this matrix reality, if we look at like this whole whiteboard is the universe. You're in this location in the matrix, experiencing this dimension because of your beliefs. So the walls of what you're experiencing and perceiving are basically the walls of your belief system. And you're always going to be operating inside the box of your beliefs. It's just a matter of, do you like the box that you're in? If you don't like the box, you need to change the beliefs that are creating the walls of the box. So that's number 1. So even when you step into your new self, you're still going to be in a box of your beliefs. But the difference is they're empowering beliefs. They are aligned beliefs. Think about somebody who maybe is a role model to you, somebody who's in a position that you want to be in reality, somebody who has an identity that you look up to. What's the difference between you and them? They've got a different belief system, okay? So that's the first thing to realize. The second thing to realize is all a belief is a thought that you've paid a lot of attention to and bought into with your emotions. So if we take the belief of I'm not smart, for example, not smart enough, not being enough is a really common core belief that a lot of people have that limits them. But let's just say your old self, the old identity that you've been, has this belief of I'm not smart enough. And this is limiting you in so many ways, okay? It's stopping you from being able to go out and work on your passions and create what you want to create because you fundamentally believe that you're not very smart, you're not intelligent. And so you're trapped in an identity and a reality that reflects that belief back to you. All truths are half-truths, okay? There is literally no actual truths in this reality except for what you program into yourself as a truth. So you are only experiencing a reality that reflects back to you that you're not smart because you believe that you're not smart. You have to believe something before you can first see it. And so you only believe that you're not smart because this is a story that you've told yourself that you've bought into with your emotions. It entered the threshold to get into your subconscious mind. So when something is either repeated enough times with some emotional intensity, or it just has so much emotional intensity maybe once, it crosses the threshold to enter your subconscious mind, and then it enters in there as a core belief, and it starts ruling your paradigm, your perception of yourself, and your perception of the world. You know, the beauty of this is, all you have to do to start mastering your beliefs is start identifying where you're creating limits and where you're staying stuck as your old self. What are the defining statements that you have about yourself that's keeping you in this old identity? And then you want to take, for example, the belief, I'm not smart, and you want to install a new, more empowering belief that aligns with your new self, this rebranded self. The empowering belief would be, I am smart enough, I am capable enough, I am intelligent. And all you have to do to rewire that is first you need to notice, okay? Then you need to say, okay, what's a more empowering belief that I can actually believe in? You want to make sure this is something you can actually believe in. And then you simply want to buy into that with your emotions, gather evidence for it, write a story on how this can be possible for you. And once you have more emotional conviction in your new narrative than your old narrative, it cancels out the old one and this becomes your new belief. Then that enters part of your identity and the box of what you're experiencing can shift and change to reflect that. So you want to write down 5 beliefs about you and 5 about what's possible. Any beliefs that are very definitive that you know are based in the old self, write them down, and you want to switch them to replace with more empowering beliefs. This could be related to finances, this could be related to career, this could be related to appearance, this could be related to your capabilities, or even just how reality operates. If you have limiting beliefs about reality and how it's created, then that's going to limit how you're able to create in reality. So start swapping out. Anytime you notice a story, a narrative, a statement that limits you, swap it out for one that empowers you automatically. Tell a new story, picture a new reality, feel safe in that new belief, buy into it with your emotions, and it will rewrite the old one. When it comes to beliefs about what's possible, You can get a lot of these by studying the mentality of your role models and people you look up to. And even just adopting like core beliefs such as everything is working out for me. Everything is happening for me and for my greater good. You know, nothing is accidental. Everything is an opportunity for me to grow. Everything is an opportunity for me to align with this empowered version of me. Telling new stories like that is what's going to really, really help you start shifting your energy dramatically. And remember, if a belief can be true for somebody else, then it can be true for you. All you have to do is buy into it with your emotions and pay enough attention to it that it becomes your new belief. What do you need to believe about yourself in order to feel empowered? What do you need to believe about money in order to feel empowered? What do you need to believe about your reality and your circumstances in order to feel empowered? Write those down and let that become your new mode of operation. Week 5, phase 5, emotional mastery. Who can guess what I'm first going to say about emotions? If you've watched my content, you're probably guessing it already. Your emotions are messengers. And the key thing, if you want to start mastering your emotional state and developing the emotional baseline that resonates with this unrecognizable version of you, you want to accept your emotions. Stop fighting your negative emotions. What you resist persists. And when you fight your negative emotions, you will never find out the message that they have for you. For week 5, I want you to fully listen to your emotions. And if you have a negative emotion, do not resist. Instead, ask, what is the message? The negative emotion is just here to tell you that something is out of alignment. So here's the question that you ask yourself when you feel a negative emotion. What am I thinking, doing, or focusing on that is equating to me feeling bad? What are you thinking that's making you feel bad? What are you doing that's making you feel bad? What are you focusing on that's making you feel bad? In order to shift how you're feeling, you need to slow down, pay attention to where the feeling's coming from, and then change the cause, which is either a way that you're looking at something or something that you're doing, okay? So an example of this, let's say, for example, you feel really bad after meeting up with a particular friend. You feel terrible. You're in a really bad mood. And instead of spiraling and letting your emotions control you and just run away with you, you want to sit with them with compassion and say, okay, what am I thinking about this situation that's making me feel bad? So maybe the way that you're thinking about this friendship is in a really negative light, and you simply need to change the way that you're looking at it, and that will make you feel better. Or maybe the entire friendship is misaligned and your emotions are trying to tell you that the friendship is misaligned. So in that case, you need to change the thing that you're doing and set some boundaries around the friendship or remove yourself from that friendship. And then guess what? The message that the emotion had for you will have been delivered, and you will have met the need that that emotion is trying to present to you. And so the emotion will fall away and you'll come back into a more aligned state. And then in your day-to-day life, for the whole of week 5, I want you to do something that nobody is ever going to really recommend you to do in this self-help, self-development space. I want you to follow your joy for week 5, okay? You will have set an amazing foundation for this, so you won't just feel like you're like slacking off and just doing random stuff. Because you'll have followed the first 4 phases, you're going to be in tune with your truth. You're going to be trusting yourself. You're going to have a lot of momentum. And at this point, I want you to start releasing control over all the things that you used to worry about and forcing misaligned actions in your reality. And I want you to really follow your joy and alignment. Okay, the reason for this is, if we look at this unrecognizable version of you, what is their emotional baseline? Maybe they're happy, maybe they're grateful, maybe they're joyous, maybe they're loving, maybe they're open, free, fun, whatever it is. If you want to become that version of you, you have to feel those feelings now and stop waiting for circumstances to give you permission to feel those feelings. This is basically how you collapse time. This is you becoming the energetic frequency that is resonant with those experiences before you see the experiences in front of you. So when you allow yourself to embody those emotions and to follow the things that enable you to feel those emotions now, you're going to attract more and more circumstances that are resonant with you while you're in this energy. Think about when you go about your day in a terrible mood. Okay, let's just take a really basic example. Your mood is so powerful. When you go about your day really cranky and really grumpy, and you go outside, everything just seems to go wrong. You perceive the negative in everything because that's resonant with your negative ass state, okay? This happened to me last week. I am typically in a pretty good, calm, positive, emotional baseline because I've trained myself to do it through this process. But last week I had a trigger, I was tired, whatever it was. I woke up in a really bad mood and I went outside, and I'm not joking. I dropped my keys, I dropped all my stuff, I picked everything up. I was sweating, I was getting more annoyed. And then I stepped in dog poo and everything was just a disaster. Why? Because I was in the emotional state that was resonant with disaster. So when you follow the things that bring you joy and bring you bliss and bring you happiness and gratitude now, and you prioritize feeling those things now over everything else, you basically lose resonance with all the stuff that resonates with the lower states. And that stuff stops coming into your experience and into your reality. And more importantly, this is really how you start becoming the energy of that version of you who you want to be. You realize you're the one generating your emotions, so you let yourself generate them now every single day. So you meet your emotional needs, write a list of all the things that bring you joy and bliss and all the things that align with the emotional state of the version of you that you want to become, and do those things now. Don't be forcing things that don't feel good. Prioritize your emotional state. The only caveat to the last point is if you have a really intense emotional trigger, this could be coming from a trauma or an emotional wound, in which case you will need to sit with that and do shadow work more than likely with that part in order for that to release. I have a whole video on shadow work. I will leave it down below. Okay, week 6 is action mastery. Notice how action is the last phase. Of course, you're going to be taking action up until this moment, but the right actions are aligned actions. These are the actions that resonate with this new version of you rather than your old program. And so how you master action on the physical plane is you prioritize the first 5 phases and you get your energy right. And then you take action in line with your intuition. So even if you have this crazy idea that's way outside the comfort zone of your old self, if your soul, if your whole body is suddenly telling you to go and do this thing and to take this action, even if it seems so random or weird, you follow it. That is how you start mastering the action component of this new self. Because this action that's in line with your intuition, this action that maybe doesn't make the most logical sense, is coming from you aligning with the energy of this new version of you. And so when you follow this, it's going to completely wire in that new identity because you're showing that you're trusting this version of you. So some examples of this: I've moved country following my intuition. I've set up a business following my intuition. And this was all coming from, these little bits of information and insight of connecting to my higher self. But my old self, every single time, there were still parts of my old self that weren't ready, that didn't want me to do it, that told me it was stupid. But I did it anyway. And this is the final step that really aligned me with the new self. So it's so important that when you get intuition, you follow it, even if it's miles outside your comfort zone. So the key thing you want to ask yourself in action taking is, are you taking actions out of fear or are you taking actions out of alignment? That's how you really start coming into alignment with the things that you're physically doing on this physical plane. So that is how you align every single component of yourself, of your identity, and of your frequency to be resonant with this new self, to completely rebrand and become unrecognizable in 42 days. It's so important that you do these in the general order that I shared with you today. And if you do it in this order, I promise you, you will become unrecognizable. Please remember, you are the cause, okay? You have access to every identity, every feeling state, every possibility actually within you, because you are one with the creator. It's just your program that's making you think in a limited way and making you think that you can't have access to these things. But beyond that program, you are infinite, you are creative, and you have access to everything. If you follow these steps, let me know down below how they go. I hope this video helped. Please remember, you've got everything you need to align with the version of you that you want to be and the life of your dreams. I hope this video helped, and I will see you all next week.